We would like to acknowledge that this podcast was recorded, produced, and created within the territory of Mi'kma'ki, the unceded ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq. Our relationship and our privilege to live on this territory was agreed upon in the Peace and Friendship Treaties of 1752. Because of this treaty relationship, it is to be acknowledged that we are all treaty people and have a responsibility to respect this territory.
Hello, everyone. Today, we're pleased to welcome a memorable member of the class of 1985. He is a graduate of Mount Allison's Bachelor of English and then BEd program. Paul Griffin has a creative mind whose teaching career led him right back to our lovely campus several decades after his graduation. Having taught theater his whole career as a high school teacher, to returning to his alma mater as the Crake Fellow in Drama in 2022, Paul Griffin has certainly left his mark on the theater scene. Anyone that's had a chance to engage him in conversation would say that he's left a lasting impact on everyone around him. Paul, welcome to When Ducks Leave the Pond.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Paul, you've spent most of your teaching career outside the Maritimes.
Yes.
But you're local, aren't you?
Yes.
What was it like growing up as a young boy in Moncton?
It's sometimes hard to think back to that time, but I do remember that even though I might have been interested in theater, there was just really almost no opportunity to do it as a child.
Okay.
I remember going to one class where we pretended to be ice cream and then wire hangers. And I was about 8 or 9, and I said to my father after, I don't need to go back. I think this is fine. So it felt like that in Moncton at the time, that there was a dearth of ways to get in. And then I went to Harrison Trimble, and by that point in time, I kind of expressed a lack of interest in doing theater. I was more into hockey and sports. Mm-hmm. But all my friends were in the musical, and they said, you got to audition. So I went down. I didn't think I could sing. So I basically, when I was in the chorus, I just acted the fool. And the director at the time, at one point said, come here, I want to talk to you. And I went, oh, I'm in trouble already. And he said, I have the part of Luther Billis. It was South Pacific. I have the part of Luther Billis, and you'll be perfect as Luther Billis. And I don't want to be a semi-lead in a musical. Good God, I just came here to be with my friends. And then you do it, and it kind of like gets that seed going, and you're kind of hooked. And there have been many times I've tried to get out, in a sense. Mm-hmm. But there's always a reason to keep doing it.
I think that's one of the nicest, the things I like the most about theater is that there's a room for everyone.
Yes.
As you might want to just, take the tickets at the door. You might want to do the costumes. You might want to do anything. And as you build your confidence, I think there's still space for you to grow within theater.
Oh, yeah.
So what led you to choose Mount A?
Well, I have to go slightly backwards. One of the reasons I was going to university, originally I finished high school, and I went to technical school to study accounting. I can't even believe I did that. I finished the year, but I realized it was not for me. And by this point in time, I had become very involved in, I reached the point where I was going to study to be a priest. And
Wow.
Yes, and in the time that I was exploring that avenue, I chose Mount A partially because I needed to get an undergraduate degree in philosophy, or at least have philosophy before I could go. And I wanted to be close to Moncton still, not because it was close to home, but because I was still very involved in a number of communities there. Still, when I got to Mount A, my second year I was the chaplain's assistant. First year I taught grade 12 catechism, and in second year, I ran the folk choir that used to go on.
Paul, where did that vocation come from?
Oh, well, I was part of a group called Teen Encounter, where you went off on weekends and you came back, and if it took with you, you got very involved. I did, and at that time in my life, I thought that would be the kind of vocation I wanted to have. Then, when I reached the end of third year, in second year, I actually worked at Dorchester Penitentiary as a student chaplain.
Wow.
I was 21 years old, and the way it worked in the summer, I marvel at this, or I'm boggled by this. When you're the student chaplain there in the summer, or when it was a max, everybody else takes vacation. The nun, the Catholic priest, the Baptist minister, and the Sally Ann major all take vacation at the same time. You're in there alone. And the way the chapel area worked, doors locked to get in, and you had to agree to let people... Well, I learned that very early. You don't allow people to come in. They choose to come in. Your job is just to accept them. And in my first orientation, the Sally Ann major said, here is the buzzer, the emergency buzzer. You're going to put that in your desk. You're never going to carry it with you. You don't tell the guards, but you don't carry it with you, because then you lose the respect and the trust of the guys.
It really was another time, wasn't it?
I was 21.
I can't imagine anything like that.
Oh.
Putting any young person in a situation like that.
And I had no training. The training I had was going with them every week, one day a week. But to be on my own was a very interesting thing. I heard many a story. They apparently liked me a lot, enough so that they weren't going to hang me from the balcony on the fourth floor, which they often felt like doing with summer chaplains. And then, of course, and this is all leading to a point. When I came back from that, not surprisingly, I went into a depression at a time when we didn't understand or didn't articulate that.
Yeah.
And so I essentially went to class, stayed in my room, and saw no one for like 3 months. And the people from the community at that time didn't, of course, understand. And so the students who are part of the community at the chapel didn't really know what to do with me. And around that time, I started to meet other people. And that was when people again started to say, why don't you come out and do theater? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? And so I started doing a little of it. And then one day, we had a professor named Rick Knowles, who was here at the time, who is a very now supremely prominent member of Canadian theater in Canada. And he was doing a collective called Casey Superstar. And we had to audition, and I decided I wanted to, because collective creation I thought might be interesting. And so we had to do a 3-minute bit on ourselves. So I got in there, and I decided to do this thing where I went from like mime, from praying to turning that into performance. And so after, Rick talked to me about it, and he said, do you think maybe that theater is exactly the same as what it was for you in the church, but different and more useful for you now? And I said, that's exactly what it is. I still have a sense of the community is still there. You're still, in a sense, proselytizing because you are doing theater with message. You are performing, which was one of the things that being a priest I thought would be interesting, was getting up and on a pulpit and doing a homily and things like that. Like there's the community of people who watch you, which is performance, and then the community of people you work with. So that
was really the specific moment, that conversation with Rick Knowles, who I remember clearly from my days at Mount A, that made you realize that maybe theater was your true calling.
Yes, and yet, good God, I went off to do a master's in English. after spending most of my time doing mostly theater here in my last like 3 or 4 years, during my education degree and a little bit after that. And so I went, but now I go off to Carleton to do my English master's because I thought, I'm coming from the Maritimes, I'm going to Ontario. They know so much more about theater than I do. I'll be like a country mouse with the city mice, and I'll be screwed. And so I thought, I'll just go and I'll. But again, the theater there is called Sock and Buskin. And so on a lark, I decided to see what it was about. And I auditioned for a play called Sexual Perversity in Chicago. And
that's a long way away from the priesthood.
It certainly was and is. Yes. I made up for lost time. So I auditioned, got the role. And then all of a sudden, within 3 months, I was running Sock and Buskin. And I realized, we think, from being from the Maritimes, we think we're second-class citizens. Mm-hmm. And then you get there and you realize you're not, partially because we have a real work ethic. And this has happened to numerous friends. I've talked about it often with friends who've gone off to other spots in Canada to study, and they'll always say, what I learned being a person at Mount A, but also just being a young person in the Maritimes, is you got to fight for what you want, because not everybody's going to believe that you're really good at what you do. And because of that, we're quite a far ahead, I felt, of university students in Ontario.
Interesting.
That might be inflammatory.
No, that's okay. I remember moving to Ontario to do my master's after Mount A, and the culture shock was quite something. Mm-hmm. Quite something. I'd like to probe a bit about, your spiritual journey.
Yes.
We talk a lot at Mount Allison about service and community and purpose. How do you think that early spiritual journey that you experienced shaped your understanding of purpose and service?
Of purpose and service. It's not something you think about a lot, but if I ever take stock, I realize that I don't necessarily want to be the person in the spotlight. I want to be the person supporting other people to get into the spotlight. And when I say the spotlight, I don't mean to be a big star. I mean to feel fulfilled, to feel like they now have a stronger purpose. When I taught, the nicest things that were said by students was, you help me understand this, or I feel so much more comfortable doing these sorts of things. People that who've gone on to fairly stellar careers in arts will say to me, it all started in your class, And so I realize that stems from the fact that I don't really feel like I want to talk all the time. I want to see what you've got and see what you develop and see what you explore, and we all do it together. And I think that all comes from that idea of community and of being a part of something as opposed to being the only one spearheading it. So I think of it that way, I guess.
Yeah. Well, just want to talk a bit about your career. You've had a long and rewarding career as a teacher in Ottawa. What was the most fulfilling part of your time in the classroom?
There are lots of things. I mean, it's really nice it's so nice to turn on a TV and be watching and then go, oh, that's what you're doing now. That's great. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or various people I've taught, like when I was at Lisgar, before I taught at Canterbury, I taught David Hine, who wrote Come From Away. And every once in a while, I think that's really interesting to think about. And then there are people who've gone on to Jordan Tannehill has won 2 Governor General Awards for writing, a lot of things like that. So that's interesting. But there are loads of moments and times of just individual things in the classroom, but our shows are our classroom because of the nature of the program I was in. And so there was one year, as an example, where one of our students died at Christmas, brain tumor.
Wow.
And we were going to do a show 3 months later, which we were going to do. And originally it was going to be this really dark theme. And I said to them in January, I said, well, that's unfair for everyone in this room. We're not going to do something dark. We're going to do something with hope. And we created a show. And what we decided to do was all the money that we made from that show would go to either a scholarship or to the family. And so it was this, suddenly, it wasn't just people doing a play. It was a team of people thinking about how can we do the best possible job we can at the cheapest amount so that that money can then be given to other things. And I think out of all the shows I directed there, that was the one with the least amount of friction. Everybody was about
Understood.
the same thing.
Well, it's about impact, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so impact on the students and their lives. I think that's why teaching is still and will always be such a popular career choice, because it really does fulfill that part of us as teachers who want to have impact and enjoy the success of others, which is exactly what you've described.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Now, you recently put on an original production.
Yep.
It was called Actually, let me start from the beginning. You ended up, before we talk about this,
Yeah.
you're back in Sackville.
Yes.
You've been here since 2022. We were very, very lucky to have you come back as the Crake Fellow. Now, for those of you listening who might have heard the word Crake or the name Crake, but aren't sure of how it all fits into this, Dr. Crake was a professor here at Mount Allison in classics. He was here, oh my goodness, I don't know, 40 years, 30 years, something like that. But before his death, he founded the Crake Institute, and it was really to support the humanities, all the different projects at Mount Allison. And I mean, how lucky are we that, not only did it bring you here, but the foundation has enriched the student experience for the past 4 decades. Yeah. We're talking internships and guest lecturers and teaching fellowships and research projects and awards and scholarships. We are so very, very lucky to have those opportunities for our faculty and our students.
Yes.
And one of those opportunities given to us by the Crake Foundation was to have you here. And so the students who are participating in the performing arts have gotten to experience things through your eyes and have led to some really interesting productions, one of which is entitled The Juliet Project.
Yes.
So what was that experience like? Where does the name come from? What were the key influences? And tell us about it.
All right. Well, it's a COVID thing.
Oh, okay.
Is the way to describe it.
Okay.
What I mean by that is I had gone to see, at Gananoque, I'd gone to see Brockville, actually, to see a production of Romeo and Juliet before the pandemic, of course. And the play started, and I had 2 friends that were in it, so I was there to see them. The play started, and I went, oh, so it's just a traditional Romeo and Juliet. And so I started looking around, you just, as you do when you've seen 15 Romeo and Juliets, you just start kind of thinking of other things, looking around. And then I hit on this moment where I went, what would I do differently to make this feel more contemporary? And I was thinking a bit about it, and then I promptly forgot for 3 years. And so during early COVID, I was at a computer going, I should write something. And at first it was going to be a sort of a workbook on how to teach high school drama. And then I just suddenly popped in my head, wait a second, you had this idea about Romeo and Juliet. And so I thought, well, this is a perfect time to play with this, because that's all it was in the beginning. It was just, I was playing with an idea. And the idea was, what if Juliet knew at the start of the play, overheard what was going to happen to her, and she decided that she needed to find a way out of that. What would be the best thing to do? Marry a doofus and dump him after a couple of years so that she wouldn't have to marry Paris. And so that was sort of my preliminary idea around it. And so I started working it, and I was amazed to see how much of a simpleton Romeo is if you look at it from a slightly different slant.
What do you think Shakespeare would have said about what you were writing?
Well, it's an interesting question. I believe, and I don't want to, and I'm going to sound naive, but I find it interesting that I think it's the fourth folio, it's entitled "The Most Lamentable and something Tragedy of Romeo and Juliet," and the only time he's used that terminology is in Midsummer Night's Dream to describe the short play at the end, which is of course a comedy. The two plays, by the way, were written a year apart. The most lamentable and tragical tale of Romeo and Juliet was what it was, and I thought this has a comic feel. I don't know what he would say. I don't know if we're supposed to treat it like it is. It is not a tragedy on the level of King Lear or of...
No, it's more about a messed up family.
Yes. And you wonder what an audience at the time would have thought of these two young people who fall in love immediately. And a lot of it stemmed for me from the balcony scene. Because most people treat the balcony scene like it's this... like the kind of perfection of true love, you know? But if you read it, it's really a problem scene for Juliet because she admits she loves Romeo without knowing he's there. And so she then has to make sure that he does love her. So she keeps asking him, how do you love me? Oh, I love you like this. No, don't swear on that. Oh, I swear on the moon. No, don't swear on the moon. She's always going, that's not, and to the end it becomes, okay, the only way I know you're going to love me is if you marry me. And that's why they marry so early, because it's the only way that she can be sure he loves her. And I thought, that'd be really interesting if she knew he was there and set that up to make it say, oh no, what am I going to do? You heard me say I love you. Oh, what can we, I guess you'll have to marry me, which of course fit very well into my concept of how I wanted to make the play work. So that was the starting point. And then I realized that I needed a narrator. And the narrator, at first I thought it'd be Juliet. And then within like 10 minutes, I thought, no, it's Rosalind. Rosalind, who does not speak in the original production, now gets a chance to speak. However, she's a contemporary Rosalind.
Absolutely. I've always wondered if there was some link or impact of Romeo and Juliet on what we saw happen in the 1800s, in the evolution of Victorian society and the societal norms and concepts of love and how society is supposed to interact with each other at these kind of very regimented levels. And I always kind of thought, because of course it was written much earlier, but these notions of this, true love and love at first sight and all these things you hear about in Victorian times, I've always found that an interesting thing to think about.
Yes, and one of the reasons I chose Romeo and Juliet is because it's so pervasive. You don't actually need to say very much for people to know what's going on. People who build houses have Juliet balconies. It's jargon. Yeah. And what does that mean? A small balcony that was in Romeo and Juliet, Mm-hmm. And all carpenters are like, yeah, I know what that is. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that play has had a very pervasive influence on culture. And yet at the same time, I feel like a lot of times people didn't understand, like that scene kind of underlines the fact that, are they really in love, or is it really just simply young love and they feel they have to do this? Which then makes me go, would this have been funny in Shakespearean time?
Interesting.
Would an audience have gone, oh my God, can you believe they're going to get married because she said she'll... Maybe they would.
Oh, these darn kids type of thing.
Exactly.
So you've written this version.
Yeah.
It's called Juliet. The Juliet Project. Why that title?
I've made a number of plays in the last last 30 years that if they're a new idea on something old, I just tend to put the word project to it. Sometimes it changes and sometimes it just stays, because what I'm really think I'm doing with it is I'm just going, this is what everybody knows. What if we do this? And it's a project on that. Also, the other thing to that, and why I wanted to call it the Juliet Project, I have a lot of grads, is obvious, that have been through theater schools. And so I often run into them and talk to them and, go out for coffee and things. And I've had numerous conversations with young women who graduated from theater schools. And I'll say, are you interested in Stratford? Do you want to do Stratford? And they'll be like, I don't really want to do Shakespeare. And then we talk about that. And they say quite often, like, there's nothing there for me. He's writing for a male audience. He's writing women who are played by men. You don't feel, he's written some good female characters, but not because they're necessarily something I connect to, they said. And that stayed with me. And I thought, can I play with this and see if I could come up with something that they go, okay, no, this I can play. This is fun. She is in control of the situation or reacting to the situation, as opposed to being kind of an appendage. It's interesting, and I made the comment in the play, it's interesting to note that in Act 5, she essentially has 100 words, because through most of it, she's
silent,
like in a tomb. And then she wakes up and goes, oh no, and kills herself immediately. And that's all she says. Whereas Romeo just gabs and gabs.
So hence the Juliet Project.
It's a project about Juliet.
How did the students at Mount Allison react to this production? Were there any notable moments when it was staged? What was that like?
It was quite good. Like we were, every once in a while I would stop and think about the fact that, God, how presumptuous of you, Paul. You've written a play and you're doing it as a main stage with only one workshop and you think it'll be fine. And so I would often go, I can't believe this. I'm trying to do this. And yet it went over really, really well. Like much better than I thought it should have to some degree. Yeah.
It's interesting just listening to you speak, about your teaching career and your students. Alex Fancy was in to do one of these podcasts recently, and one of the things he said that really stayed with me is that while he was at Mount Allison, he majored in conversation.
Yes.
And that's really what your teaching's been about.
Yeah,
and
very much
your
so.
theater is about conversations and how all those conversations end up in our brains kind of, and then you're producing the Juliet Project based on all the conversations you've had.
Very much so. I work a lot in collective creation. So if that means for me, I may have a cast of 15 or 16 or 17 people. I've taken them to the Edinburgh Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And although the idea of what the play's about and where it ends up is mine, like I'm the one who's shaping it, it happens through conversation after attempt at this, attempt at that, after discussion of what we tried. It is not like, it's not the old school system of directing where, I am the I, my way or the highway, just do what I say. And it becomes much more about, there are 17 brains in here, which is way better than one brain. Thank you. Let's see what you got.
Do you know that your students here at Mount A have a kind of a nickname for you? Do you know what they refer to you as?
I didn't, but I.
They call you the mask guy.
Yeah.
So we know that masks can be such a really powerful tool in theater, in helping actors embody different characters and emotions. Mm-hmm. What drew you to working with masks? How did you use them to enhance the student experience during your productions? And do you have any memorable moments involving masks during your time as the Crake Fellow?
Well, yes, I'll get to that last. I think I don't mind being called the mask guy, but I think of myself as a practitioner of physical theater.
That's a better title.
I think so too, than the mask guy. but they can call me what they want. It's okay. They didn't call me that to my face, so that's fine. I think that I firmly believe this. And when I got the Crake Fellowship and I was asked, what do you want to teach? And I thought, I'm open to anything, but I really wanted to do a mask class, which essentially is neutral mask and character mask, plus a beginning part of what we call emotional state musicality. And you're exploring the body in a different way. There's very little reading. There's a lot of creation. There's a lot of living of a character in the time that you have. And students who take it will, in some ways, it seems like it's easy. I think somebody coming into the class who had no background in drama would watch it and go, well, it's easy, until they do it, and then they realize it exercises a different muscle. And so you have to suspend your disbelief. You have to be able to see that you're not playing a character in the sense like you're a child imitating a cowboy or something. You become the character. You like three-dimensionally. And so some people are worried, oh, that's improv. It isn't improv when you're doing it with a mask, because you have this, I like to say to students, you have, your text is the mask. And then you just create character out of that and you just play. And so people will finish the class and they'll say, this is one of my favorite classes. And I go, yeah, but is that just because it's fun? And they'll go, no, it's hard. It's actually really hard. But I've enjoyed it the most because it opens up things about themselves. It opens up things about them as a performer. And there is this magical moment that happens with almost everybody that plays a mask where they're doing a bit or doing a scene with somebody, or they're just exercising, and they pull the mask off and they go, whoa, because they don't even know where that came from. And we want that magic in theater, in any form of theater. But mask, because of the mask, it gives you a more accessible point to it. So I think of it as a course that should always be offered in the first or second year, so that you have the 1701, which is about understanding the text and understanding the whole theater world and scripts and all that, and then the other side, which is the physical theater. There's this cartoon I saw once, which was like the masks of tragedy and comedy, and then between it was this little balloon floating up, and it says physical theater. And because it seems silly compared to these monolithic institutions, but it has its own place and its own thing. And it undercuts the seriousness, is the way I would describe it. A lot of the work that I did, I originally started doing mask doing Commedia dell'arte. And it's one of those things where there was this workshop, 4-day workshop. I was asked if I wanted to do it. I said, sure, I've never done it. It'd be fun. After the workshop, the head of Odyssey Theatre in Ottawa said, I want to train a small troupe for 2 years to create a show. Do you want to do it? And I was like, sure. So I trained in mask for 2 years.
Oh,
just
wow.
Doing that, yeah.
Training, strictly?
Strictly every Tuesday and Thursday night for 3 hours, training with a teacher who'd gone to Lecoq in Paris, which is one of the top mask schools. So my original starting point wasn't even neutral in character. It was specific masks of specific characters. But once you learn that, you start to learn other things. And then it's enriching in a way that is different than classical working with script. It opens things up, which I love. So to that end, I try to conflate the two by doing my first Crake Fellow show was a play called 7 Stories. And it takes place in the side of a building. A person is thinking of jumping and keeps being interrupted by people in windows. And in the original, the people in the windows there were 16 characters. They're played by 4 actors. Mm-hmm. And in the original, they're not wearing masks. But I thought, well, we could do them in mask, in character mask. Number one, it will help them develop the characters quicker because we'll explore all kinds of things. And then it makes them even more distinguishable on stage. So that was, in some ways it's harder, in some ways it's easier to do.
Is there a particular moment during either that production or some of the others you've done as the Crake Fellow that have really stood out for you?
There's always things. Like when Rosalind comes in at the start of the Juliet project and stops the show and says to the audience, "We're not going to do this." You could feel the audience shift, because we did this thing at the start where we did the most pompous classical version of the prologue of Romeo and Juliet, with pompous music playing and everybody standing there looking very serious. And then she comes in from the outside, pushing through the ushers and all that, and says, "Oh, I'm not late. Great. Good to be here." And just starts the whole thing. And you could feel the audience go, "Huh?" And in fact, it threw them enough on their heels that for the first probably almost 30 minutes, they kept reacting to things much bigger than I thought they would, because I think they were just so flummoxed by this shift. So that was a very interesting and fun moment.
Isn't it great to listen to the audience?
Oh.
Listening to an audience and how they're reacting, the look on their faces, when you're kind of off stage, there's nothing better.
Nothing better. And as a director, you suddenly see the play through their eyes and you go, "Oh, I need to fix up a couple of things."
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is why on Broadway they go off somewhere else first and do their first round of shows there to see the problems before they get to Broadway.
Ah, there you go. Well, maybe the Juliet project will get to Broadway.
Oh, no. But we're trying to get it published. We'll see.
Oh, well, good luck. I hope that works out.
Be nice.
It sounds absolutely amazing.
We think it'd be for grade 10 or 11 students.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just a deeper appreciation of Shakespeare, too, which is not easy, right?
No.
It's not easy for everyone.
No.
What do you hope students take away from their experiences with masks, both on stage and in life?
Oh. I'll start with in life. Especially in the area that is at the beginning stage, before we even get into the mask, as I'm prepping them to understand more of what their body does and how their brain works and how you can play with that. And so I teach them things like status, which is this idea that we all are different status levels at different times depending on the situation we're in. And so that can be, the way I used to sell it was, do you want to be able to let your parents think that they've won every argument with you? I can show you how that's done through status. And the students are always like, what? So I start there. But the bigger thing is just simply to allow them to understand that they can be more in control of situations than they think they can. And so we do things with that. We do exercises about, what is acting? Is acting just saying words, or is acting a connection to something deeper? And if the connection is to something deeper, then the connection is to essentially you in your real life and applying that to whatever you're doing. So there's a lot of exercises around that, exercises around the idea of how deep can you go to be a character. And so there are moments where you'll do exercise and you go, okay, let's all now decompress and let's talk about that exercise. And it took you to a place you weren't expecting. Are you okay? And those kind of things are interesting too. And then the work itself, a neutral mask is about understanding how to be authentic and how to be in control of what your body is showing or not showing. I've worked with a lot of students who audition for theater schools, and quite often the things that I have to do are purely physical. Like I'll say to somebody, your shoulders always go up when you speak. What? I'll say, start your monologue, and I'll hold the shoulders. And I'd have to keep their shoulder, and they go like, oh my God. Yeah, you don't know you're doing it, but these are the things that you do. And so neutral is a good way to explore and discover how you hold your body. Where is it? We do an exercise where people just walk with the mask on, and we say where they lead from. And we can point out how they can shift things in their body to create a completely different character, which is useful for the theater, but it's also useful for real life. If you're applying for a job and you go in and you slouch and you can't look at the person who's interviewing you, you're not getting that job. Same thing as if you're overeager, you're not getting that job. You got to find the balance.
Well, speaking of, how students benefit from these types of courses, one of the things that and we're very grateful that you've done for a long time in your teaching career, is that you referred your high school students to Mount Allison during your teaching career.
Yeah.
What was it about your university experience that made you want to share it with the others? What did you tell prospective students and their families to make them want to attend Mount A?
It was an easy sell. I left Mount A, and the first thing I thought when I got to Carleton is, it's all right. It's not Mount A, the first thing. Mount A at the time, and I'm sure it's the same now if I was a student, this wonderful connection of being a close community that gives you opportunities to do things almost as soon as you get here, instead of waiting till your third or fourth year when it's a big place. Let's say you go to U of T or something like that. So you can involve yourself immediately. You can change what you involve yourself in, and nobody's going to really think anything of that. I have professors from that time that I will always remember. I have to say, shout out to Albert Furtwängler.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Remember him well.
Yeah, such a good prof. And yet, at the same time, he's the kind of guy that, here we were, first year class, there's Albert Furtwängler. If you remember him, bald head. He looked like Gargamel from the Smurfs, with his goofy laugh, and you'd think, oh, students are going to make fun of him. Nobody made fun of him. We were all like, say more, say more, say more. And everybody that goes to courses here have those people, And it's nice because that started in first year, as opposed to being in a class of 400, feeling completely detached and basically having to force yourself to get through it. You were engaged immediately, and that applied to everything. And so when I got specifically to Canterbury High School, which is a performing arts high school, I realized that because there is a visual program, a dance program, a lit program, a drama program, and a music program, I went, my God, this is like a miniature Mount Allison. So I was able to approach things sort of the same way there, which was the idea of communication between departments, making sure that the people had, even though they were younger, an opportunity to say what they felt, say what they think, which again was another thing that I found you could do here. I remember the discussions in the theater with Rick and Alex and Arthur Mocher. We had, outside of the classroom, deep discussions about what is the nature of theater, why do we have theater, does it have a use anymore? And these discussions go on for days sometimes. A sense of a dynamic space. So it wasn't hard to sell students because I just described it that way. And what would happen is students would come here. One of our grads, Sean Tebow, came here, and then he texted me at Christmas. He went, I just got the part of Hamlet in Hamlet at Windsor Theatre. And so other kids go like, really? But he's first year. I said,
that's what happens here.
It can happen here.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
just like being a teacher's assistant. Can happen in your second year.
Oh, yeah.
Easy. Residence assistants, you have opportunities, and certainly researching in labs, our science labs. You're doing things in your second year that most people are lucky to do in a master's. So
yeah, very true.
Yeah. Paul, you've kind of retired from your career as a teacher. You've been here as the Crake Fellow for a few years. is what as you kind of enter retirement, sort of, kind of, but not really.
Yeah.
What do you hope to? Where does theater fit into your future plans?
I'm staying on teaching one class this year. I'm hoping we bring back mask next year. Would be nice. I'm directing a play this term, Albertine in 5 times. People want to see it, that'd be good. Gotta do a push somewhere.
Absolutely, that's why we're here.
Yeah. So I'm still involving myself here. I've also started a small theater company. So,
tell us about that.
well,
Does it have a name?
It does. We're calling it, at this point in time, Panopticon.
Oh,
Based
goodness.
on the concept Panopticon, but it extends from there. We've worked it through. It's a little too, I don't have a one-line description of it. But essentially, at the heart of it is we want to do work that is original. I mean, our own self-written work, and also creation work. One of the plays we're starting to work on, I want to do a play about reading and get a lot of people's opinion about reading, what they love about reading, when it had a change in their life, and then from there create a show around all of the stuff we get, and then I want to do it in libraries, which I think would be really fun.
I think that would be incredible.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. So it's hard to, I don't think there'll ever be a time where I go, well, I'm done doing theater.
Yep.
I tried that a couple times already. It didn't work.
Didn't work, did it?
Yeah.
We, I guess it's kind of time. It's hard to believe. So much time has gone by so fast. Just a fascinating discussion.
Well,
Thank you. Thank you for joining
I've had
us.
a good time.
And as we do every time here at the When Ducks Leave the Pond podcast, we have a quick round of rapid fire, one-word questions for you, and we're going to ask you to respond with the first word that comes to mind. Now, I didn't give you the words, just so everyone knows. Are you nervous?
Yeah, I don't have much of a filter, so that could be bad.
That's okay. That's okay. We can always delete. It's all good.
Oh, that's true. Good.
All right. Number 1. Moncton.
Not.
Baking.
Love.
Mask.
Love.
Teach.
Fulfillment.
Mount Allison.
Happy spot. 2 words, but
One feeling.
yeah, happy.
Edinburgh.
Life.
Learning.
Lifeblood.
Crake Foundation.
Appreciation.
Expressive.
Overly.
And the last word, whiskey.
Greatest.
That's a great word.
How do you distill it down to one word? I use the word
Distill it. See,
yeah.
oh, you're funny.
There we
That's
go.
hilarious. Well, I think you won that round with that number 10 answer. I like it. I like it.
Great.
Paul Griffin, thank you. Thank you for coming in to speak with us. Thank you for, you were never my teacher, obviously, but I think I can say thank you on behalf of all the students that you've impacted and influenced. And thank you for coming back to Mount A. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me for this, and thank you for Mount A for bringing me back. That's great. I have to tell you, I walk around like having been gone for a long time. I used to live in the house that is Bloom's Flowers.
Wow.
And it was the best place in the world to live because you knew what you were going to do for the whole weekend just by sitting on your porch as people went past.
Yeah.
Can't say that in a big city.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Oh, thanks again, Paul.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
A sincere thank you to the executive producer and director of our podcast, Kay, who is the quadrant intern at the Alumni Engagement Office. A sincere thank you to them, and especially to the fine folks at CHMA FM Radio who have made all of this possible by allowing us to use their facilities here on campus.
Mount Allison strives to be a safe, respectful, and welcoming place for people of all genders, diverse sexualities, gender identities, and gender expressions through education, programming, support, and advocacy. We prioritized upholding, maintaining, and honoring that environment during the creation of this podcast.